The heater died at 11:47 p.m., right after my best friend told me she had never once imagined kissing me, which would have been easier to believe if she hadn't been wearing my hoodie, curled under a plaid blanket, and staring at my mouth like it had personally offended her. My name is Lucas Grant. I was 29, a freelance architectural drafter from Portland, and I had built a quiet, careful life around not wanting things I couldn't keep, especially not Sophie Reynolds. Sophie had been my best friend for 7 years. She was 28, a middle school art teacher with copper brown hair she twisted into messy knots when she was thinking, and a talent for making every room feel less like a room and more like somewhere you might confess something dangerous. We weren't supposed to be alone in a cabin. We were supposed to be part of a group trip. 4 friends, 2 cars, one long weekend in the mountains, board games, bad wine, maybe a hike where everyone pretended not to be winded. Then Devin got the flu. Priya's mother slipped on ice and needed help. My brother, who had begged me to come so I wouldn't spend another February weekend eating takeout over blueprints, texted me at noon. Sorry, man. Rain check. I should have canceled. Sophie should have canceled. Instead, she stood outside my apartment building in a cream beanie and an oversized green coat holding 2 coffees and 1 paper bag of cinnamon rolls and said, well, either we waste the deposit or we go prove we're emotionally stable adults. I looked at the bag. Are those from Marcy's? Yes. Then I'm emotionally stable enough to drive. That was how it started. Innocently, stupidly, with pastry. The cabin was 3 hours east, tucked above a frozen lake behind a road that looked like nobody had remembered cars existed after 1983. By the time we arrived, the sky had gone a deep, bruised blue, and snow was falling in the lazy, cinematic way that makes people in movies make terrible decisions. Sophie stepped out of my truck, stretched her arms over her head, and said, look at us, 2 adults, alone in the woods. Nothing weird about this. I opened the tailgate. You're making it weird. I'm acknowledging the weird so it loses power. That has never worked for you. She pointed at me with a mitten. It works on 7th graders. Sophie, 7th graders fear nothing. They're basically raccoons with Wi-Fi. She laughed, and there it was. That old, familiar tug in my chest. The one I usually folded up and shoved behind sarcasm. Because Sophie was beautiful, yes. Anyone with functioning eyes knew that. But that was the least dangerous thing about her. The dangerous thing was how she noticed. If I went quiet, she noticed. If I hadn't slept, she noticed. If I pretended my divorce 2 years ago had only left paperwork behind and not a crater in the middle of my confidence, she noticed that too. My ex-wife hadn't been cruel, not exactly. She had just slowly become honest. She wanted bigger, louder, someone less predictable than a man who measured kitchens for a living and remembered to rotate tires. When she left, she said, you're safe, Lucas, but I don't think I ever felt chosen. That sentence had lived in me like a splinter, so I stopped choosing. It seemed polite, less messy. And then there was Sophie, who had a way of walking beside me that made restraint feel like cowardice. Inside the cabin, the first problem revealed itself immediately. 1 bed, Sophie said. I was carrying the cooler. I nearly dropped it. The listing had said 2 sleeping areas. Technically, that was true if someone considered a sagging love seat under a moose painting a sleeping area. The bedroom had 1 queen bed with a thick quilt and 2 pillows. The living room had the love seat, a stone fireplace, and a rug that looked itchy enough to file taxes. Sophie walked slowly into the bedroom and turned around with her eyebrows raised. I said, I'll take the couch. That is not a couch. That is a decorative punishment. I've slept in worse places. When? Airport, Chicago, 2019. You had a neck pillow and rage, not the same. I set the cooler down and tried not to look at the bed, or at her standing beside it, cheeks pink from the cold, hair escaping her beanie. We'll figure it out, I said. She tilted her head. You're doing that thing. What thing? The noble suffering thing. Very attractive in old novels, annoying in cabins. Attractive. She said it lightly, like a joke tossed into the air, but my brain caught it and held on too long. I cleared my throat. I'm not suffering, I'm strategizing. Lucas, you just volunteered to fold yourself onto a love seat designed for a depressed ferret. Some ferrets are taller than you think. She smiled, but it softened before it reached laughter. You know, you don't always have to make yourself uncomfortable so everyone else can relax. That landed too close. I looked away first toward the windows turning black with night. Habit? I know. 2 words. Gentle. Unshowy. Sophie's specialty. We unpacked groceries, made grilled cheese in a skillet with uneven heat, and ate at the small pine table while snow thickened outside. The cabin had old yellow lamps, mismatched mugs, and a shelf full of paperbacks with cracked spines. It should have felt awkward. It didn't. It felt like a life we had accidentally borrowed. Sophie kicked my sock under the table. If we were a real couple, this is where I'd complain that you cut the sandwiches diagonally wrong. There's a correct diagonal. There's a romantic diagonal. I'm sorry, I must have missed that section in husband school. Her expression flickered. Just briefly. Regret, maybe. I looked down at my plate. My divorce came up sometimes, but usually like weather in another state. Known, not visited. Sophie's voice lowered. I didn't mean... It's okay. No, it was a dumb joke. It was a good joke. I'm just emotionally 90 tonight. She leaned back, studying me. For what it's worth, you would have made an excellent husband to someone who knew what to do with steady. I laughed once, quiet. That sounds like something you'd embroider on a pillow for a sad man. I would never embroider. I would hot glue it badly. Our eyes met, and the room changed in that subtle way rooms do when the joke runs out, and the truth is still sitting there. I wanted to say something, not everything, just something honest enough to scare us both. Instead, the heater gave a metallic cough from the wall, rattled like a dying shopping cart, and shut off. At first, we stared. Then Sophie said, "Tell me that was supposed to happen." I walked over, tapped the thermostat, and watched the little screen blink once before going blank. Nope. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. How cold is it supposed to get tonight? I checked my phone. 1 bar. Weather app loading like it had personal issues. 21, I said. Inside or outside? Outside. She narrowed her eyes. That was not comforting with enough confidence. I found the binder the owners had left on the kitchen counter. Wi-Fi password, trash instructions, emergency numbers, a cheerful note about how the propane heater occasionally needs patience. I had patience. The heater did not care. For 20 minutes, I followed instructions, reset breakers, checked the propane line outside with a flashlight while snow slipped down my collar. When I came back in, Sophie was standing by the fireplace holding a box of matches. Good news, she said. We have wood. Bad news? I have never successfully started a fire without creating a smoke alarm event. I was a Boy Scout for 6 months. Why only 6? I asked too many questions about not practicality. Together, somehow, we got a fire going. Not a heroic, roaring fire, more like 3 sticks having a private disagreement. But it gave off heat. Sophie crouched beside me, close enough that her shoulder pressed mine. Neither of us moved. Her hair smelled like snow and vanilla shampoo. My hand was braced on the stone hearth inches from hers. I could feel the warmth of her through the sleeve of my hoodie. She whispered, Lucas? Yeah? Have you ever thought about it? I looked at the flames. Fire safety? Us. There are moments in life when a man hears the exact question he has avoided for years and suddenly becomes fascinated by kindling. I swallowed. Sophie. That's not an answer. It's your name. Very good. You do know me. I looked at her then, and the teasing in her face faded into something more vulnerable. Before I could speak, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced over, and whatever she saw made her cheeks flush darker. I shouldn't have looked, but the screen lit up big and bright in the dim cabin, and the message preview was impossible to miss. From Priya. So? Did you finally tell Lucas you're in love with him, or are you still pretending this is a platonic mountain retreat? Sophie froze. The little fire popped between us. For 7 years, I had been careful with her. careful with my hands, my jokes, my glances, my stupid, hopeful heart. And now the whole cabin seemed to hold its breath while Sophie slowly turned back to me, eyes wide, embarrassed, terrified, and somehow still brave. Then the last weak warmth from the vents faded. The room dropped into a deeper cold and she pulled the blanket open with trembling fingers. "Just get in," she said softly. "I'm freezing." There are sentences a man can misinterpret if he is reckless. "Just get in, I'm freezing." Perfectly practical, completely innocent. A survival instruction, really. Nobody wanted to lose toes because two emotionally repressed adults were afraid of a quilt. Except Sophie was still looking at me like her best friend had just read the secret she'd been carrying in both hands for years. I stood there, useless. She gave a shaky laugh. "Lucas, I'm not inviting you to solve calculus. I'm saying the fire is tiny, the heater is dead, and you have the body temperature of fresh bread." "Fresh bread? Don't make me compliment you better while I'm humiliated." That broke something in me. Not completely, just enough. I crossed the room, but instead of climbing under the blanket, I crouched in front of her where she sat on the rug. The fire painted gold along her cheekbones. Her fingers clutched the blanket edge like she might use it as a shield. "Soph," I said. She closed her eyes. "Please don't do the kind rejection voice." "I don't have a kind rejection voice." "You absolutely do. You used it on that woman at Devin's birthday party when she asked if you wanted to go dancing." "I did want to go dancing." Her eyes opened. "With you," I admitted. The words landed between us, small and enormous. Sophie blinked. "What?" "At Devin's party. You were wearing that blue dress with the little buttons, and you kept stealing lime wedges from the bar. I spent half the night trying not to ask you to dance because I knew if I touched your waist in public, I'd forget every reason I wasn't supposed to." Her lips parted. Outside, wind dragged snow against the windows. Inside, the fire finally caught a better piece of wood and rose with a soft crackle. Sophie whispered, "That was 3 years ago." "I know. You remember my dress? I remember things I should not remember." Her face changed then. The panic didn't vanish, but something warmer pushed through it. Wonder, maybe, or the beginning of anger. "You absolute idiot," she said. I exhaled. "Fair. 3 years? More." "How much more?" I rubbed a hand over my face. "Do you want the honest answer or the version that makes me seem less emotionally constipated?" "Honest. The night you helped me repaint my apartment after Elise moved out." Sophie went very still. That night had smelled like primer, Thai takeout, and the kind of grief that made a man embarrassed to be seen. My ex-wife had left 2 months earlier. The bedroom wall still had a rectangular ghost where our wedding photo had hung. Sophie had shown up in ripped jeans with paint in her hair and said, "We are evicting beige from your life." We painted until midnight. She sang badly. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Then, while washing brushes in the kitchen sink, she had leaned her hip against the counter and looked at me with such fierce tenderness that I almost stepped into her arms. Almost. Instead, I thanked her like a coward and slept on the couch because the bedroom felt haunted. "I was a mess," I said now. "You were kind." I told myself I was confusing gratitude with wanting. "Were you?" "No." Her breath caught. I leaned back against the coffee table, suddenly unable to stay crouched in front of her like a man begging at an altar. "But you deserved someone whole. Someone who could choose you without making you wonder if you were just a bandage." Sophie's expression sharpened. "Do not decide what I deserve and call it noble." I almost smiled. There she is. "I mean it." "I know." "No, I don't think you do." She scooted closer, blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. "You think love is only valid if it arrives clean. Perfect timing, no baggage, no fear. But people are not rental cabins, Lucas. You don't inspect them for damage before you decide if they're worth staying in." That metaphor got away from you. I am cold and in love. My metaphors are doing their best. "In love," she said it out loud, not hidden in a text preview, not disguised as Priya's teasing. Sophie looked straight at me, cheeks flushed, chin stubborn, and gave me the truth like she was daring me to mishandle it. My chest hurt. I'm scared, I said. Her gaze softened. Of me? Of losing you. You don't get to keep me by never reaching for me. I looked down at her hand on the blanket. Small smear of yellow paint still marked the side of her thumb from some school project. I had seen her hands make birthday cards, fix broken mugs, cradle crying students, gesture wildly during stories. I had imagined holding one too many times to count. So I reached. Slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Her fingers slid into mine, cold at first, then curling tight. A simple touch. Best friends could hold hands, best friends could comfort each other. This did not feel like comfort. It felt like a door opening. Sophie stared at our joined hands. Oh, I laughed under my breath. Oh? I may have underestimated the hand-holding. You've held my hand before. Not like you meant it. That sentence went through me. I threaded our fingers more securely and tugged gently. Come here. For once, she didn't tease. She came, blanket and all, settling beside me with her shoulder against my chest. I wrapped an arm around her because she was freezing, yes, but also because I wanted to, because I had wanted to for years. Because if this ruined everything, at least I would not have ruined it by pretending. She made a tiny sound when my hand settled at her waist. I froze. Is this okay? If you stop now, I'll commit a cabin crime. My laugh shook both of us. She smiled against my shirt and I felt it everywhere. We sat like that in front of the struggling fire, the blanket around us, her knees tucked against my thigh. The cabin was still cold. My toes were going numb. The love seat glared at us from the corner like a rejected chaperone. Sophie tilted her head back to look at me. So, what happens now? I don't know. Honest, annoying but honest. I don't want to rush you. Her brows rose. Lucas, I have been in love with you long enough to develop emotional fossils. I don't want to rush us then. That softened her. Okay, I want to do this right. You're already trying to make it a building permit. I like permits. Permits prevent collapse. Romantic. I can be romantic. I have seen you label leftover soup by date and viscosity. That was one time. It was minestrone, Lucas. It has one viscosity. I smiled and her eyes dropped to my mouth. There it was again. The room tightened around that glance. I lifted my free hand and brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. Her skin was cool beneath my knuckles, but she leaned into the touch like it warmed her. Sophie, I said, barely above a whisper. Yeah? I have thought about kissing you so many times that it's embarrassing. Her teasing vanished. Me too. My thumb paused near the corner of her mouth. It would have been so easy to close the distance, to turn 7 years into one breath. Her fingers tightened in my shirt, and for a second I thought she might pull me down herself. Then the fire collapsed inward with a hiss of sparks, and the sudden draft from the dark hallway made her shiver hard. Practicality returned, rude and icy. I glanced toward the bedroom. We need to get under real covers. Sophie's eyes widened, but she didn't move away. That sounds both responsible and wildly not responsible. I'll stay on top of the quilt if you want. She gave me a look. Lucas? What? I did not confess my inconvenient fossilized love so you could sleep like a Victorian ghost at the foot of the bed. My pulse kicked. What are you asking for? Color rose in her cheeks again, but she held my gaze. Brave. Always braver than me? I'm asking you to come to bed, she said. With me, to sleep, to hold me, and to stop acting like wanting me makes you dangerous. I couldn't answer for a moment. Then I stood and pulled her up with me, keeping her hand in mine. The bedroom was colder than the living room, the single bed piled with a heavy quilt and 2 folded wool blankets we found in the closet. We moved around each other shyly now, brushing teeth in the tiny bathroom, pretending it was normal to avoid eye contact while sharing toothpaste after a mutual confession. When I came back, Sophie was already under the covers in leggings and my hoodie, hair loose over the pillow. She lifted the blanket. My heart did something structurally unsound. I climbed in carefully, leaving a respectful inch between us. Sophie stared at the ceiling. Wow. What? That inch is very polite. I'm trying. I know, it's sweet. She rolled onto her side to face me. Also stupid. Then she scooted closer until her forehead rested against my collarbone and her cold nose brushed my throat. Every muscle in my body locked. She sighed. Fresh bread. I wrapped my arms around her, not as a friend, not as a mistake, as a man choosing the woman he wanted in the dark, in the cold, with no audience but the snow. After a long time, her hand slid over my chest and stopped above my heart. Lucas? Yeah? If you change your mind tomorrow, I'll survive, but don't lie to protect me. I pressed my lips to her hair. It wasn't a kiss, not exactly. It was a promise, waiting to become one. I won't change my mind. Her fingers curled in my shirt. And Soph? Hmm? I'm in love with you too. She went utterly still. Then she tipped her face up, eyes shining in the faint moonlight. For one breath, we hovered there, warm under the blankets, terrified and wanting. Her mouth was inches from mine, and this time, neither of us looked away. I had imagined our first kiss 100 different ways. On her apartment stairs after too much wine, in my truck while rain blurred the windshield, at some crowded party where jealousy or courage finally shoved me over the edge. Never in a freezing cabin under 3 blankets, with Sophie's knee wedged between mine and her cold nose brushing my jaw. It was better than anything I'd imagined. She kissed me first. Not because I didn't want to. God, I wanted to. But I was still caught in that last thread of caution, that thin old fear of taking too much. Sophie had no patience for it. She lifted her hand to my cheek, whispered, "Lucas, please." And then her mouth found mine. Soft, careful, trembling at the edges. For one stunned second, I couldn't move. Then my entire world narrowed to the warmth of her lips, the small catch in her breath, the way her fingers slid into my hair like she had wanted to do that for years and was furious about the delay. I kissed her back. The sound she made broke me a little. I pulled her closer, one hand at her waist, the other cupping the back of her neck. Her hoodie bunched under my palm. Her body fit against mine with a rightness that felt almost insulting, like the universe had been tapping its watch while we wasted time. The kiss deepened, slow and searching. Not frantic, not careless, a conversation. I missed you. I've been here. I want this. Me too. When we finally separated, Sophie's eyes stayed closed. I brushed my thumb along her cheek. You okay? She nodded, then opened her eyes. I'm trying to decide whether to be romantic or smug. Can you be both? I contain multitudes. I smiled helplessly, and she smiled back. Not her usual bright, weaponized grin. This one was softer, dazed. Then she pressed her face into my chest and groaned. I kissed my best friend. I noticed. What if I'm terrible at it? I looked down at her. Sophie. What? It's a valid concern. You kissed me and I forgot about weather. Her mouth curved against my shirt. That good? I am 100% certain I have feet, but I can no longer confirm their location. She laughed, and the tension that had been holding us like a wire eased. We slept eventually, or something close to it. I kept waking because she moved closer every time the cabin creaked, because her hand stayed tucked against my ribs, because happiness, as it turned out, was not restful. At dawn, pale light slipped through the curtains. The cabin was still cold enough that leaving the bed felt immoral. Sophie was asleep with one cheek pressed to my shoulder, hair everywhere, my hoodie sleeve pulled over her hand. I watched her for a full minute before guilt kicked me. Not guilt for wanting her, guilt for waiting so long. Her lashes fluttered. Are you staring? Yes. Creepy. Devoted. One kiss and you're devoted? No. I tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. That happened earlier. Her eyes opened fully then. Sleepy, warm, uncertain. There it was, the morning after. The fragile little bridge between confession in the dark and truth in daylight. I could feel her wondering if I would retreat. So I didn't. I leaned down and kissed her forehead, then her nose, then the corner of her mouth. She exhaled like she had been holding her breath all night. Good morning, I said. Her smile bloomed slowly. Good morning, boyfriend? My heart kicked hard. The word hung there, half joke, half question. I had been divorced. I had signed papers that turned promises into filing codes. I knew labels didn't save anything. But Sophie wasn't asking for a guarantee. She was asking me to stand where she could see me. If you want, I said, yes. Her eyes widened. That was too easy. I can make it harder. Submit 3 references and a cover letter. Do I need a permit? For emotional renovations? Yes. She laughed and shoved my chest, but her hand stayed there afterward. Then she went quiet. I want, just so we're clear. I covered her hand with mine. I want too. We kissed again, slower this time, morning soft. Her lips tasted faintly like mint. Mine probably tasted like panic and sleep. She didn't complain. Eventually, hunger drove us out of bed. We layered up like explorers, and I got the fire going, while Sophie made coffee in an ancient percolator that sounded like it was summoning ghosts. She set 2 mugs on the table. Welcome to our first date. I looked around at the cold cabin, the unwashed skillet, the emergency blanket draped over a chair. This is a date? Absolutely. There's coffee, forced proximity, and I'm wearing your clothes. High standards. For you, yes. We ate cinnamon rolls warmed in the skillet, pulling them apart with our fingers because the cabin had exactly 1 clean fork and Sophie declared sharing utensils too intimate for people who have only kissed twice. 3 times, I said. She licked icing from her thumb. You counted? I'm an architect-adjacent professional. Precision matters. I'm going to abuse that information. I assumed. Snow had stopped, leaving the world outside blue-white and quiet. The lake below the cabin was hidden under mist. For a while, we sat shoulder to shoulder on the rug by the fire, drinking coffee and pretending the cold was charming. Sophie leaned into me. Tell me something you haven't told me. That's broad. Good. Start anywhere. I stared into my mug. Romance, I was learning, was not just kissing the woman you loved. It was letting her look at the places you'd kept boarded up. When Elise left, I said, I was relieved before I was sad. Sophie didn't move. I never say that because it sounds awful, but our marriage had gotten so quiet. Every conversation felt like I was failing a test I didn't remember signing up for. When she said she wanted out, part of me thought, thank God. Then I hated myself for thinking it. Sophie's hand found mine on the rug. I looked at our fingers. I think that's why I didn't tell you. Because wanting you felt clean. And I didn't trust it. I didn't trust myself. You can be relieved something ended and still grieve it, she said softly. That doesn't make you cruel. I swallowed. You always make room for people to be complicated. I'm a teacher. Complicated is where the kids hide the good stuff. I laughed, but it came out rough. She turned toward me, tucking one leg beneath her. My turn? You don't have to. I know. She took a breath. I've dated people because I was trying to stop comparing everyone to you. That one hit with heat and ache together. Soph. It wasn't fair to them. Or me. I'd sit across from some perfectly nice man and think, Lucas would hate this restaurant lighting. Lucas would have brought a better umbrella. Lucas would know I'm pretending to like olives. You do hate olives. They taste like salty pennies. They do. Her smile wobbled. I was scared if I told you, and you didn't feel it, I'd lose the person I wanted to call when everything went wrong. So I kept making myself settle for almost. I set my mug aside. Then I took hers and set it down too. What are you doing? She whispered. Choosing you properly. I kissed her there on the rug in the pale mountain morning, with coffee cooling beside us and smoke smell in our clothes. She rose into it immediately, both hands on my sweater, not shy now. When I pulled back, she followed me half an inch, which did dangerous things to my self-control. You can't say things like that, she murmured. Like what? Choosing you properly. Her eyes searched mine. I'm not emotionally insured for that. I'll add it to the permit. She laughed, then kissed me again, quick and bright. By noon, the cabin owner had texted back that a repair guy couldn't come until the next morning because the road was iced over. We had power, water, a fireplace, and enough food, so there was no real danger. But the message shifted something, another night. One bed. Sophie read my face and arched a brow. You're doing math. I'm assessing logistics. Lucas. Yes? She stepped close, looped her arms around my waist, and looked up at me with that brave, impossible softness. I'm not afraid of another night with you. I rested my forehead against hers. Neither am I said. And for the first time in years, I meant it. By mid-afternoon, we had turned the powerless heater into a third person in the relationship. I think it's judging us, Sophie said, standing in front of the dead wall unit with her hands on her hips. It's a machine. It watched us kiss by the coffee table. It did not watch. It failed to provide warmth and then lurked. I came up behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist. Not because I needed to, because I could. That was becoming a dangerous discovery. Sophie immediately leaned back against me. See, this is the heater's fault. I'm willing to thank it in the guest book. She turned in my arms. Dear cabin owners, your broken heater forced years of emotional honesty. 2 stars. Only 2? One bed was a bold choice. I kissed the tip of her nose. You're complaining? No. Her hand slid up my chest. I'm documenting. We spent the rest of the day like people trying on a future in borrowed clothes. We took a short walk down toward the frozen lake, bundled in mismatched layers. Sophie wore my flannel under her coat and kept slipping on patches of ice so she could grab my arm with theatrical panic. I'm beginning to suspect some of these near-death experiences are staged, I said. She gasped. You think I would fake helplessness for hand access? Yes. Correct. At the lakeshore, the world was all white silence and dark pine. Sophie stood beside me, shoulder pressed to my arm, her breath clouding between us. It's weird, she said. What is? How normal this feels. I looked down at our gloved hands linked together. Good weird or terrifying weird? Yes. I understood. Every touch still came with a small shock of disbelief. Every smile felt like stepping onto ice and realizing it would hold. Sophie looked out across the lake. When we go back, people will have opinions. Priya will require a full report and possibly charts. Devin will say he knew. He did not know. He will say he knew. He once thought oat milk came from squeezing oatmeal. That does sound like Devin. She laughed, then grew quiet. Your brother? I stiffened before I meant to. Sophie noticed, of course. Lucas. He'll be happy, I said. But he'll worry. Because of Elise? I watched a clump of snow fall from a pine branch. Because after the divorce, I was not exactly a joy to schedule brunch with. Sophie squeezed my hand. You were heartbroken. I was bitter. You were hurt. I was both. I turned toward her. I don't want you to become proof I'm okay. I don't want anyone treating you like my recovery plan. Her face softened in that way that always undid me. Then don't let them, she said. That simple? No. But I'm not fragile, Lucas. I'm not a vase someone placed near your damaged shelf. I huffed a laugh. Your metaphors are aggressive today. I'm cold. My poetry has teeth. She stepped closer. I choose this too. I choose you too. If people worry, we'll answer them. Together. Together. The words settled inside me like a match catching. I kissed her there by the lake, tasting cold air and cinnamon sugar still lingering from breakfast. She rose onto her toes, mittened hands gripping my coat, and kissed me back like she was making a point to the trees, the frozen water, and every year we had wasted. When we walked back, she didn't let go of my hand once. That evening felt more like a date than anything I had managed in my adult life. We made pasta with jarred sauce and too much garlic. Sophie found candles in a drawer and arranged them on the table with solemn ceremony. Ambiance, she announced. This is starting to look like a seance. We are summoning romance. I thought romance was already here. Her eyes flicked to mine over the match flame. Is it? The teasing in her voice didn't hide the question underneath. So I crossed the kitchen, took the matchbox from her hand, and set it down. Yes, I said. It's here. Her lips parted slightly. I cupped her face, thumbs brushing the soft line of her jaw. And it's not just here because we're snowed in, or because you're wearing my clothes, or because there's one bed and a villainous heater. She smiled faintly. Villainous. It's here because I am in love with you. In daylight, before dinner, with garlic breath pending. Her laugh came out breathless. That may be the most convincing declaration I've ever heard. I'll put it in writing if needed. No. She touched my wrist. Say it again. My chest tightened. I'm in love with you, Sophie Reynolds. Her eyes shone. I'm in love with you too, Lucas Grant. We stood there in the candlelight, smiling like idiots, until the pasta boiled over and hissed on the stove. Very romantic, she said, grabbing a towel. I meant to do that. Sure, for ambiance. After dinner, we played cards on the rug in front of the fireplace. Sophie cheated outrageously and denied it with the confidence of a corrupt mayor. You have 3 queens, I said. I'm popular. That is not how cards work. You're just upset because I'm winning. You're winning because you invented rules. All rules are invented, Lucas. I lunged for her cards. She shrieked, laughing, and rolled away, but the blanket tangled around her legs. I caught her around the waist before she could topple into the coffee table, and we ended up breathless on the rug, me half over her hair spread beneath her like a copper halo. The laughter faded. Her hands rested on my shoulders, the fire crackled beside us. The cabin creaked softly in the wind. My pulse pounded so hard I was sure she could feel it. Hi, she whispered. Hi. Her gaze dropped to my mouth. This is a very compromising position for a man accusing me of card crimes. I'm prepared to negotiate. With kisses? That depends on the severity of the crime. Grave, she said solemnly. Several queens involved. I kissed her. It started playful, but playfulness had edges now. Her fingers slid into my hair. My hand found the curve of her waist through the hoodie. She arched closer, and I had to stop kissing her long enough to remember I was a decent person with a functioning conscience. Soph, I breathed. I know. Her hand softened at the back of my neck. Too fast? Not bad fast, just fast. She nodded, cheeks flushed, eyes warm rather than hurt. We have time. Those words nearly broke me more than the kissing. I brushed my lips over her forehead. We have time. We rearranged ourselves with awkward laughter, her tucked between my legs, her back to my chest, my arms around her. She dealt another hand of cards over our knees as if this was normal. Maybe it was becoming normal. Later, when the fire settled low and the candles burned short, my phone buzzed on the table. Elise. For a second, I just stared at the name. Sophie felt me go still. Do you need to answer? No. The phone buzzed again. A text preview appeared. Heard from your brother you're up near Pine Lake. Hope you're safe. Also, I found some of your old drafting books. We should talk when you're back. A year ago, that message would have dragged me backward. Not because I wanted Elise back, but because old pain had a way of pretending it was unfinished business. Now Sophie sat in my arms, quiet and trusting me to choose. So I did. I turned the phone face down. Sophie looked over her shoulder, not jealous, not demanding, just open. You're sure? She asked. Yes. You can talk to her if you need to. I know. I kissed her temple. But not tonight. Her fingers traced over my forearm. What's tonight? I held her tighter, feeling the steady beat of her heart against my hand. Tonight is ours. Sophie turned in my arms and kissed me, slow and certain, like an answer. And when we went to bed later, there was no polite inch between us. There was just Sophie curling against me in the dark, her leg over mine, her hand over my heart. Just before sleep, she whispered, I'm glad the heater broke. I smiled into her hair. Me too. Then my phone buzzed once more from the other room, ignored and distant, while the woman I loved fell asleep in my arms. Morning arrived with a knock that made Sophie jerk awake and accidentally elbow me in the ribs. I grunted. Good morning to you, too. Her hair was wild, her eyes half open. Did the cabin just knock? Another knock sounded from the front door. The cabin has manners, I said. She stared at me for one sleepy second, then gasped and yanked the quilt to her chin. Repair guy? Probably. We look guilty. We are guilty of sleeping. She glanced down at where her leg was still hooked over mine. Very convincingly. I laughed, kissed her forehead, and climbed out of bed into air so cold it felt personal. The repairman was a cheerful man named Hal who smelled like motor oil and peppermint gum. He stomped snow off his boots, took one look at the heater, and said, "Oh yeah, this thing's dramatic." Sophie, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, whispered, "See? Villain." Hal fixed it in 20 minutes. 20? After 2 nights of emotional collapse, life-altering confessions, and kissing my best friend under emergency blankets, the heater needed a new igniter and a little encouragement. When warm air finally pushed through the vents, Sophie looked at me across the room. I expected relief. Instead, she looked almost disappointed. I crossed to her. "You okay?" She nodded, then tugged me closer by the hem of my sweater. I know this is irrational, but it feels like the cabin spell is ending. I crouched in front of her. There was no spell. Lucas, there was bad maintenance and snow. And your friend's incriminating text? Her lips twitched. I took her hands. But this? Us? That comes home with us. Her expression softened, then wobbled. Promise? I had been careful with promises after my divorce, careful to the point of cowardice. But Sophie wasn't asking for forever in a reckless way. She was asking if I would still choose her once there were roads and phone service and separate apartments. Yes, I said, I promise. She leaned down and kissed me, warm and sweet and sleepy. Hal cleared his throat loudly from the kitchen. Sorry, Sophie called, not sounding sorry at all. The drive back to Portland was slow, sun flashing off snowbanks, the truck heater blasting like it had something to prove. Sophie sat in the passenger seat wearing my flannel again, her hand tucked in mine on the console. Halfway down the mountain, my phone reconnected to the world and exploded. Priya, I require details. Devin. I knew it. My brother, Caleb. Please tell me you two finally figured yourselves out. Sophie read over my shoulder and snorted. Devin did not know. I'll fight him. Then Elise's name appeared again. Sophie saw it. Her fingers didn't tighten. She didn't pull away. She just waited. That was why I loved her. Not because she never got scared, but because she trusted me enough to let me be honest. I pulled into a scenic turnout where the valley opened below us, all winter light and dark trees. You don't have to do this right now, Sophie said. I do. I typed carefully. Thanks for letting me know about the books. You can leave them with Caleb or donate them. Hope you're well. Then, after a pause, I added, I'm seeing Sophie now. I'm happy. I hit send before I could polish it into something safer. Sophie stared at the message. Seeing? I looked over at her. Dating felt too small. In love with felt like maybe a lot for a text to my ex-wife from a mountain turnout. She considered this. Fair. I can send a correction. No. She smiled. I like happy. I lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles. I am. Her eyes shone in the winter sunlight. Me too. When we got back, things were not magically perfect. They were better than perfect. They were real. Priya did demand details, though she had to settle for the edited version over dumplings the next weekend. Devin claimed he had felt the energy shift years ago, which was rich coming from a man who once missed an entire surprise party planned for him. Caleb hugged Sophie so hard her feet nearly left the ground, then pulled me aside and said, Don't overthink this until you ruin it. I told him, that was plan A, but I'm revising. Sophie and I dated like people who already knew each other's coffee orders but still had whole countries left to discover. I learned she hummed when she graded papers. She learned I talked to stubborn cabinet hinges. I took her to a restaurant with romantic lighting, and she admitted she still hated olives. She dragged me to an art supply warehouse and spent 20 minutes explaining the emotional difference between two nearly identical shades of blue. We fought once, about 3 weeks in. Not loudly, not cruelly. I canceled dinner because a client moved a deadline, and Sophie went quiet in that careful way that meant hurt was trying to look reasonable. The old me would have apologized, rescheduled, and hoped the discomfort passed. The new me drove to her apartment with takeout, knocked on her door, and said, I don't want to become the man who assumes you'll understand until you stop feeling chosen. Her face crumpled a little. Then she let me in. We ate noodles on her floor and made a rule: no noble disappearing. If one of us was scared, we said so. If one of us needed reassurance, we asked. Romance, it turned out, was not a single brave confession in a cabin. It was choosing and choosing again in kitchens and traffic and tired Tuesdays. By the following spring, Sophie had a drawer at my place. Not an accidental drawer, a deliberate one. She labeled it with a sticky note, Emotional Renovations, Phase 1. I left it there. In June, we went back to the cabin. This time, the heater worked perfectly. Suspicious, Sophie said, standing in the bedroom doorway. I set our bags down. One bed again? She turned to me with a slow smile. Tragic. We made grilled cheese diagonally romantic and drank wine at the pine table while sunset turned the lake gold. Later, we took a blanket outside and sat on the porch steps, her tucked between my knees, my arms around her, fireflies blinking over the grass like tiny sparks from a future I no longer feared. I used to think love was supposed to feel like falling, I said. Sophie rested her head back against my shoulder. And now? I looked down at our hands, fingers woven together under the blanket. Now I think it feels like coming in from the cold. She turned in my arms and kissed me as the first stars came out over the lake. Behind us, warm light filled the cabin windows. In front of us, the mountains held the last blue of evening. And for once, I didn't feel like I was borrowing a life. I felt like I had finally stepped into mine. What would you have done if you arrived at a freezing cabin with only one bed, the heater broke, and your best friend told you to just get in? Have you ever experienced something similar? Tell your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.